Srinivas.
What is the
There's a lot of noise on Mandeep's
Yeah,
side.
it sounds like a microphone noise.
Yeah, it's microphone noise. Are you moving or are you in the outdoors?
In the wind,
no,
maybe.
no, I'm
I
there's a lot
just
of
I muted Mandeep just for some time. Yeah, so that we can start.
okay.
No,
No.
Rohini, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Yeah, so
Jerome, just do my test.
Hello from Korea.
Hi, Jerome.
Hi.
Okay. Switch off your video.
अरे सॉरी गलती से हो गया
okay, Aditya, yeah, I think it's a good time.
It's time to start.
Yeah.
Okay. So is everyone here?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll unmute Mandeep. Okay.
Okay. Welcome everyone to the Surfatial study group called Breaking It Down. We will directly launch into the question. Does everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
More or
So
less.
this is the study group that we put together, as you already know, to think about different methods of engaging with contemporary culture, to call it broadly, but also about different kinds of practices and thinking about practices that all of us are involved in. Okay, so the first question I would like to raise today for the study group is to find. One second. Is it necessary to have a ruler in order to make a building?
In
I
order
mean,
to make a building,
make a building. Yeah.
I would say so. If you don't have a ruler, how would you know how long the brick can be?
You could use one brick to measure another brick. You don't need a ruler.
Okay. Yeah, but how would you calculate how many bricks to buy?
Not all buildings are made of bricks.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, there are, I mean, if we are actually talking of architecture, there are a lot of examples where measurement is not necessarily used, or there may be other units of measuring. But if what you're asking is whether a measure is required,
Yeah, measures. Rohini says you can use string or rope, and you're saying you're asking whether I'm saying if measure is required.
yeah.
Because if you
But
build a hut, or if you build like the bowerbirds, they use sticks that they put together. They just have a thatch, you just collect a bunch of sticks. That's also a building.
No, but I'm actually talking about calculation. So I'm saying that if you have an expanse of space, how do you make sure you know what are its dimensions? How do you make sure you
But do you
know
need to
how
know
big it
that?
is?
I think so. I mean, if you're building something, you're definitely going to be seeing what is present in that particular environment, and then you decide what you want to build based on where you're building it. So you're also going to be, and that may not necessarily be a measure, but that is an assessment.
Yeah, it's an assessment. That's right. You can make an andaza of it.
so Mandeep just joined the call. So Mandeep, the first question for today is that do we need a ruler to make a building? Is it necessary to have a ruler to make a building? To construct something, it is necessary to have rules in another sense?
Do you need rulers?
Mm-hmm. One second, guys.
What about organic ways of constructing? I mean, the kind of construction we see in nature.
But
Precisely.
like
Like a bird nest, yeah.
Yeah.
so like Rohini was saying, strings and ropes. So
Yeah.
using your limbs also maybe like 1 hand long, 2 hands long.
But that's still measurement.
Yeah, that's still measurement. But
There
like
could also be instinctive ways of
so
knowing what you're
approximation.
building. Yeah,
Yes, approximation.
yeah.
But isn't approximation also a kind of measurement?
Approximation is.
Like even instinct, right? Like what you were talking about, assessing a space. How much space do I sort of just scan the area?
Yeah.
So I guess a ruler can be anything. Ruler is a measure. And are we saying that measurement is necessary
Yeah.
to construct something?
Can we talk about what we are constructing?
It's a building. That's what the question said. It's a building.
The building is just a metaphor. The building can be interpreted as anything. So, like for example, it could be constructing the piece of a performance, and then what is the ruler then if it is the construction of a piece of a performance, if it's construction of a artwork that is supposed to be.
See, you are seeing the entity, whichever the entity be.
Yeah. What would be the ruler if you were to think whether the ruler is necessary for you to produce that structure that you would envisage or imagine to?
See, if we were to think of a totally improvised structure, like a nest, there's an idea of a form, but there isn't necessarily a measure. So you're totally improvising. Whatever you get, you're putting it and throwing it there. Wherever it lands, you use that as your next step.
We don't really know that to be a fact. There may be. A lot of nests do have a very clear rational.
Okay, right. But okay, forget a nest. Suppose you're just constructing some structure which you don't even know what it's going to look like.
Okay. Rohini is saying, I don't know about the tool of measurement as much as a means of construction.
So the ruler is not a tool of measurement, but the ruler is a means of construction.
Yeah.
But if I can
I'm
just
wondering whether this idea of a ruler can be a personal one, whether in the way that you define the ruler for yourself becomes the way in which you start defining what the construction is for you.
So it's you mean to say to chart out a particular sense of it's almost like starting a blueprint for you. Is that what you're saying?
Well, what I'm saying is that in terms of dance, when you think through making performance, when you're thinking through dance, you're in a way laying out the part of the process is laying out the codes for yourself. What are the parameters of what you want to explore, and in a way that becomes your ruler for the work.
But is that a ruler or is it a vision? Is it a ruler or is it a vision of the complete construction?
I think vision of the complete construction sort of gets developed along the way. But
so you are saying that the ruler can be a metaphor for something that I may choose it to be in a personal sense.
Yeah, in a way. Yeah.
So here's what I feel about that. I think the moment we make something into something else, we lose the ability to taking it for what it is to begin with. So if we just let the ruler into the room, maybe 5 minutes back, and if we replace it with something which is a variable at this point, let's say everyone's personal notion of a ruler, then we can't really see it for a ruler anymore.
But it's an abstraction, right? So it is still a
वो
ruler.
abstraction.
Look, for that matter, even measurements, it depends on which metric system one may be using.
But it's still a measurement.
Yeah, so if you're looking at it as a parallel, if one person's using a different metric and another one's using a different metric, the measure is not going to really matter very much.
Right.
It's like speaking two different languages.
That's right. But at the end of the day, you're communicating something.
So, but if you were to think, for example, Shaunak, just to bring you in, if you were to think script as a ruler, and then you think that whether that is the ruler with which you are trying to construct something, and then whether you would like to look at the script as a ruler or look at the script as something else, what would be the vision of that be?
But no, before that, I just wanted to quickly say that within a large part of computational analytics, there is a huge difference between counting and measurement. So, for example, the etymology of the word digital comes from the word digits, right? Which in itself is broken up into zeros and ones, because originally within the arithmetic predicate of it, we could only count up till 10 figures, and because we were using our 10 fingers, and all our metrics, all our forms of measurement, be it the feet, be it the meter, etc., has to do between the gap between the ridges of our fingers. That's how the original metric system originated. So I've been very interested within the original impulses behind Euclidean geometry, etc. And a large part of what we think configures and constitutes foundationally the ruler has come from that kind of a counting system.
No, but regardless of what the genesis and what the what the root of the word is, I think there is a generally accepted common meaning of the word ruler. And if you're talking about the function of that a ruler can perform, then I think it's possible to ask the question that Aditya asks, that to make a building, you need a ruler.
Do you need that kind of structural thinking? Yes, it is. What you said, Mark, is what the system size depends. There's a noise again.
Yeah, there's a noise again.
Rohini actually was testing a mic.
There, yeah.
Yeah, it works.
What?
Your mic works.
It works? You can hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yay! Okay. Good. Awesome.
So I was just going to Shaunak that do you think then that is the origin of the idea of measuring and also the idea of the ruler? Then, but do you think that ruler is somewhere things that got systematized to be measured? What were you arriving at? I was not really clear.
Like a sort of a jump off on what I was saying earlier within computational analytics. Now, you asked about a screenplay, right? And one of my favorite lines about a screenplay is that a script or a screenplay is chance killed word by word. And I really love that line because what it does is that it talks about an unmapped sort of potential wherein each measurement, if we take a word as a finite discrete unit of a measured attempt, kills chance word by word. And in that sort of a bounding of
in the sense that you're seeing each word in the script as an instruction, as a specification.
See, but that's the thing, no? Within any kind of communication, the minute it gets verbalized, externalized, etc., utterances themselves become instructions. Be it a script, be it, to my mind, a frame.
No, but ordinary language is not an instruction; it's the act itself, right? So when I'm talking to you, the sounds that I make, the words that I say, are they mean something for themselves, within themselves, right? So there is no secondary interface between language and what you are hearing and how you are parsing what I am saying.
No, I mean instructions in the sense of one specific, let's, for the lack of a better word, think of a command which delineates its border areas in terms of what it means, what its interpretative bandwidth is, and what the conditions of its possibilities are. So you can say anything. So
नहीं
within
मगर
that,
वो समझ नहीं आया ना. Like what I'm saying is, if I'm saying something, how is that an instruction? Like how is that I don't really understand that.
no, I meant it in the sense that because Mopi asked me how measurement and a ruler would come in within the realm of, say, script writing, and when I say that each and every word that you're writing becomes a reducing of the surface area of what the script could have become before you wrote it. So in that way, there is a kind of mapping of what you intended to do, which immediately then gets fixed, which then immediately gets like put on the table, delineated the minute you start writing. And in that sense, I mean it as a measurement slash metric slash instructive unit in its being. So it doesn't, I'm not saying ki, her shabd or her utterance becomes an instruction. That's not what I mean at all. I mean in the sense of there you putting out into the world a quantifiable discrete unit by what you're putting in. And a lot of angst within any kind of creative endeavor for
No,
me
but
at
I'm
least.
curious about the use of your word instruction with language, because I mean मेरे को वो context नहीं समझ आया कि I'm not saying that you're saying that all of language is a instruction, but even if you're saying some part of language is an instruction, I don't really get the connection.
Okay, sorry, go ahead. I'm just saying that we have to speak in English because there are non-Hindi speakers in
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
So language in this case was this was just a response to the screenplay universe that Mopi invoked, which is that each word within this case one small linguistic unit. So for example, if one is writing any kind of a scenario, any kind of a dramaturgical unit, within that each word, each gesture that you're writing down becomes a kind of bounding down, becomes a kind of an introduction of finitude into the world that wasn't yet written but was in the process of becoming. You know what I mean? Like
Because everything you write in a script takes time, some bit of time code away from the actual,
from the pure potential of it's becoming, you know, like, I mean, it sounds very vague, but what I mean is just to break it down into an actual
but I think I get it now. It's some part of the
if I
time
was
code.
writing like right now I'm sitting in a wooden walled studio. If I was writing of a scene where a fire erupts in this, in my head I can think of the potential of this sort of a emergence into the cinematic world as completely unbounded, right? Like kuch bhi, I mean it can be anything, but that sort of process of like potential becoming immediately gets stripped and cut down into discrete units of either shots, either language, either whatever. So any kind
वो
of
time code है, मतलब वो video है तो time code है ना उसका. It's some kind of a finite thing. It has a duration.
But how can a building unit be equated, or a building block? How can you equate that to a measuring device? You're just laying down the blocks. You're only laying. See, what I can say is, if I just throw a bunch of building blocks together as they occur to me, without having any preconceived notion of what's going to emerge from it, if I'm going to throw them down, and whatever I have, I put it together. I'm not going to measure it. I'm not using it to, it's like a very ad hoc kind of construction. So I don't need a measurement device.
But maybe it's not measure in that sense, like I think Rohini had mentioned before, that you don't see it as a measure, but more as a means of, constructing.
If we are thinking of words, for example, if we are thinking of words to capture the potentiality, to me those look like more like building blocks than some sort of a measurement or a rule set even.
How is the ruler a tool?
Ruler.
If Rohini was saying that, how is that also?
I mean, you need words.
I was basically trying to say that for me, the minute I hear the word ruler, or even for that matter measurement, it seems extremely rigid and sort of set in a particular structure and a particular direction already. So I mean, if I'm taking what Mopi had said in the beginning and saying that, okay, if we look at this as just a way to unpack other forms of practice, which might include performance and just art, I mean practice, right? Anything which is not maybe that specific. But I like the word measurement maybe more than ruler, but what I'm just thinking in terms of my own context, because there's very rarely any form of, I mean, it's interesting. I wouldn't use the word measurement, but I'm trying to figure out in my own head right now what it is.
But
and it might be.
Measuring the experience, I thought, in the context of
Yeah.
you, is the measuring the experience a very important question for you? Is what I was trying to think, especially in your experience context.
No, but I'm not sure if it's that personal a question actually. So
Yeah,
because
fair enough.
if a ruler is a word in this language that we are using, that means it has a common sense of what it means to be a ruler.
You know, I'm interpreting it in terms of scale. Like even in music, if you have a scale, it is somewhere hinting at a certain region of articulation. You're not talking of very specific um, enunciations or whatever, but you're just largely creating a boundary of where the articulation is happening.
Well, what's interesting also is, I mean, measurement makes you think of time as well, and then I think that opens up quite a bit of stuff, because time can be, in different ways, not only in terms of whatever you're doing or whatever, but also, as I think, I forget now who was talking about also time. I mean, I was thinking even in terms of performance, when something has a certain, it sort of unpacks over a duration, and I think measurement in terms of also how you construct that duration is quite interesting. So, yeah.
Right, and you don't even necessarily need to keep track of the time. It
Exactly.
could just keep going.
But performance, when Mandeep, you were referring to performance earlier, would you agree that performance is basically at its most basic form, it's a time-based media, so you have to measure the duration.
Yeah, and I'm wondering whether if we bring it down to this conversation of the act of building itself and the role of a ruler in the act of building. And for me, if I were to really think about what this ruler could be as far as performance making is concerned, dance is concerned, then it would be something that measures time for me. So a metronome. It could be something that measures space for me, which is a ruler, a measuring tape. And so in a way, if I were to actually think, can I do without these things in the act of building, then the answer is yes, very much. And what that opens up as a possibility is the idea of intuition and the idea of actually experiencing time and space through the body in a way where you're not relying on any kind of exact measurement, but you're actually experiencing it in a way then it becomes a personal experience. And then coming back to this idea of when the ruler really becomes your own personal experience of time and space, and it becomes a more intuitive building process.
Yes.
So, but is it basically, would you say that performance is basically time-based media?
I think it's time and space. It can't not be space. Yeah.
It can't not be space, but it doesn't need to be time, is what I would say.
Yeah.
Doesn't need to be time. So you are saying it can be infinite.
It can be infinite, it can be zero, it can have an indefinite duration, like it doesn't have to be fixed. Not always, I mean, there are different sorts of performances, but it's not necessary that it has to be fixed.
Yes. Does this link? I was just wondering whether the one that of intuition and that Mandeep was speaking about, is that what Shaunak you were talking about chance? Is the chance very related to that idea of the chance that you were referring to in terms of the script writing and what it does to in actually the making of the film?
Yeah, in fact,
I think there's a problem.
There's a problem?
No, and he dropped off. Shaunak is just dropped off.
Yeah, Shaunak is dropped off.
Jerome, please come in. Test.
Can you guys hear me? Because I'm having trouble.
No, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, so I've been trying to keep track. I figure Korea's bandwidth, I thought it'd be much faster, oddly. But in terms of ruling, and I was joking with Mopi during the preparations, and what's on my feed in terms of measurement, I'm looking at it from viewpoints of you don't necessarily have to follow the rules of the ruler. And the way that it moves in time, like the ruler, if anything, is a hopeful barometer in a lot of cases where the visualizations I've had from everyone's descriptions, like I'm thinking it could be used as a shovel. What direction are you moving? Do you have to move? When do you know when the building's done? And other questions
Yeah.
of, and are you building with somebody else? Are you agreeing to what the ruler has? So hopefully
It's a
this makes
variety of,
sense.
it's a variety of things. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, but also how often are buildings made alone, and really thinking about I have to say this coming as an American living in Korea in my lovely Facebook feed that I joked with Mopi that my Facebook feed is basically three things right now of mostly activists and artists and scholars, and it's this really odd moment where it's Donald Trump, it's Pokemon Go, and it's black people dying, and yet and it's all the same people, and yet there's this barometer that we have where I was joking with Mopi. I was like, Pokemon Go miraculously is causing more world peace and community building than any policy I've ever seen. and we're already trying to think about how to make this an art piece or how to use these mechanics, and if anything it's looking at these like tactics of organizing and building in the larger sense, and like what rulers do you have to keep on discarding and what ones are you having to keep agreeing on and making. So as you're all talking about like time and nest building, which is a great example, I'm really looking at what are the types of rulers that we often have to decide whether they're worth it or not, because we're often building with other people.
Okay, Tess, would you like to add before we go to the next question?
For me, I've been thinking about the idea of a ruler as a framework of mediation. So say if we think about that in relation to art history, the ruler or the framework would be which canon you would like to associate with. So are you going to adhere or work towards the Western canon, or are you going to challenge that? You're going to challenge the centers of the art world and things like that.
Yes, that's actually directly addressing to what we are actually trying to do. Also, of course, coming from different experiences of building and making, and of course, not building and not making. Shonak, would you like to finish before we head? Because I'm going to go to the next question now.
Yeah, no, I actually just joined and I missed the last two bits. So
okay, so let's proceed and then we'll come back to when we have. The second question is, can we think of the present as a scaffolding rather than as a structure?
Can you say that again?
Say it again.
Can we think of the present as a scaffolding rather than as a structure?
Yeah. Can you type that question as well, Mopi, on the chat?
Okay, one second.
Thank you.
So what I think of straight away with that question is basically the way we articulate contemporary art now in the world. So contemporary art essentially follows a Western framework, no? So when we think about practices outside of this, so vernacular art or indigenous practices, we do not consider them as contemporary, even though technically they are contemporary, because they have had the same process of modernization. That process, though, has been separate to the West. So that's what I think of in relation to this.
I think off the point Tess made, and having that, I think it's the immediate thing I think about is in scaffolding, especially the ones that I see around in a lot of the modernization, the fast velocity of how cities are being built, often to the detriment of the people actually living there. In these massive cities around the world, I look at scaffolding where you don't know whether something's being built up or brought down. And often it's made to withstand a multitude of different weather conditions. And with that, you often see like a traditional scaffolding of like straight planks and staffs. But I think kind of linking back to the first question, it's like, what if scaffolding was made in the same way and more loosely in terms of building, where the most beautiful scaffolding in a way could actually break down these considerations of the contemporary in a way where scaffolding is actually more accurate than a building itself.
Yeah.
Mm.
So that's the
But Aditya, you're actually talking about, your question actually used the word present.
Yeah.
So can we think of the present as a scaffolding than as a structure? So you're not actually referring to contemporary, you are referring to the present.
Yeah. I would say they both are interrelated, not even though they're not synonymous. Certainly they are interrelated because we live in a condition that's called the contemporary, but we live in a temporality that's called the present. Uh, so in that way,
No,
sorry?
but the word present is more is less historical
Yeah,
than
it's
what
less historical.
contemporary is.
That is it unfreezes from the burden of what the contemporary aims to be or is
So
presented
if
as.
that is true, I'm wondering how what Tess was saying about uh, multiple notions of what contemporary includes, how that is
But
relating to this question
it's
actually.
interesting because I would say that the present and the past, for example, a lot of, for example, especially in the context of the indigenous or the folk and tribal in the Indian context, somewhere even though it is operative in the present, it is always seen as a past.
No,
So,
no, I don't agree there. Not anymore, at least. And
no, it is changing. I'm not saying they're
I think
not.
when it's being historicized, that's often an error that's made, that they try to historicize it and say this. When we talk of traditional practices, we don't take into consideration that the tradition is being lived now as we live. So I would see it very much as being part of the present. I don't necessarily relate it to something that is past, and I think if that only happens when it's erroneously historicized.
That is what I'm trying to say, that there are frameworks that try to do that, even though despite of the real fact that they are living cultures, they are the ones that operate simultaneously in the same present that we seem to be inhabiting. So that is the question. Sorry.
No, I was just saying that what I do like about just thinking about the idea of the present as a scaffolding is that the word also suggests a certain kind of constant in the process offness, if you know what I mean. So there's a sense of layering which is sort of implicit, and the idea that it's constantly being constructed. So that's interesting, I think.
Yeah.
I also like, just adding to that, this idea of it being more formative in nature. So it feels like it's almost the difference between a position and a proposition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
And I
actually
like that-
seeing them
that about
together.
it.
They're both at the same time, are they not? We are constructing a present using the present as a scaffolding. So the structure of the present is evolving as, as the present, while using the present itself as scaffolding.
But are we looking to it as the present that we're constructing, or are we looking forward? I have a feeling sometimes it's more like the present gets constructed by the way. You know what I mean? Like
But
In the moment.
future, when
No,
the
but
future is
if
constructed
you're
from the
concerned about
present.
programming the present, if you're concerned about your experience of the present actually, then you are not thinking about the future that you are linking to.
And there's two things, right? Even the future, unfortunately, whatever it is, you cannot predict what will happen at the moment. So it really depends. You have to live the present.
No, I'm saying you're living the present, but I don't know if you're actually actively constructing the present. I feel like
exactly. So that's why. So one
Yeah,
of
So strangely, we seem to be living in the scaffolding, and that's the building, and not the.
Well, but no, if you think of the present as a structure itself, the present is always a structure that's evolving.
we are trying to say that it's a scaffolding that is actually confused whether it's building or taking it down.
But I would also like to question the statement that you cannot construct the present, because I definitely feel that we can configure and change aspects of our experience. So we can choose to tune
But
ourselves
isn't that a
to
construction?
which layer of experience we want to be concerned
But
with.
that's if you're tuning it, that means you're actively doing something, which is an act of construction, right?
But you're also
Yeah, it's a
producing a
construction.
fiction of a wholeness of a structure, no?
There is already a whole. It's not about whether it's there or not. It's already there.
Well, the whole idea of a fiction again is about something that might, I mean, it's not about the present. Fiction is not necessarily completely about the present. It has another realm as well to it.
I would argue that fiction is basically the idea that the present is a universal thing. So often when we think about the present, we think of it as a very flattened idea of something that's very universal, when in fact that's completely impossible, and there are always multiplicities of the present.
True, true.
But for the one who's experiencing it, there is only that singularity, right? There isn't a even though all the multiplicity and the whole is all there, I am only able to measure what is going on right now with my senses, and I'm able to respond to it in the moment.
Okay.
So but you can experience more things at the same time. Isn't that possible? Like,
you can if you tune. Again, it's a matter of tuning, right? And there are limits to it. There are limits to the approximation that we go through.
I think along those lines of the limits, it's funny because my house is actually having scaffolding on it right now back home, and I've spent a lot of recent time on it, and the things that I have there are often when you're often building the scaffolding to be more accurate or to be more useful, and you don't pay attention to the structure because you're just making sure, is the scaffolding going to hold and work? And then I often find myself looking away from the building to the sky and wasting time in this really wonderful way where I don't care about the structure at all. And
but you care about the structure of the scaffolding.
Absolutely, and the scaffolding ends up like becoming more important than the structure for more of the majority of the time because I'm spending more time on it versus the structure itself.
Cool. Yeah, and then if you just could lift the structure, the scaffolding out, and just put that as a standalone structure, that would itself have some kind of a value.
Yes.
I'd probably live there at this point. But no, it's nice because the scaffolding, a lot of lovely time is wasted where you just, and it's okay. Versus if it were on the structure, there'd be more things to get done or more of agendas. And scaffolding is lovely in that it lags in this more healthy way, at least from my perspective.
It's an in-processness, right? Things that you're in the journey, it's happening. You know, once you finish the repair or whatever it is, it's done. Okay, what's next?
So, in processness, I would turn to Mandeep. Mandeep, would you like to add on to the in processness? Because I know that we've always had these conversations about the relevance of a scaffolding than actually arriving at a structure.
Well, actually, I had this question also first about looking at scaffolding also as a structure, and I'm wondering why we would want to keep those two separate, because I mean, in what ways is scaffolding not a structure? But I guess the question we have is about
maybe the scaffolding is not a structure because it's in the state that it is compiling something else. It is
only holding a structure. It's not really a structure. It's also a process to which a particular idea structure is
But
made.
if it doesn't have structural stability, how will it hold anything else?
Yeah, I agree with Mandeep that you have to like have some sort of a structure to have a scaffolding. I interpreted structure as like a building, like something more complete and finished, and a scaffolding is something as and the scaffolding is something temporary, and that's only there for a little while.
But I don't think structural stability is a necessity, is a prior condition for having a scaffolding. Because
no, but how can you have a scaffolding that doesn't hold together?
So
What is the use of it?
imagine a microscope. I mean, think about a microscope. What a microscope has in its viewing drawer on the slide actually uh, is so the microscope is a scaffolding for the slide.
Yeah, but the microscope clearly has a proper structure. It's designed to hold a slide.
So as far as the slide is concerned, the microscope doesn't really matter.
It doesn't. That is there, but the thing is, if we are looking at the present and we're talking about the present, which part is that? Is that the microscope or the slide?
So present is the slide, and the microscope is the scaffolding. But I'm saying that
So we are saying the present is the scaffolding. You don't think the present
but
is a scaffolding?
But scaffolding meaning structural stability is what I'm just questioning, whether the scaffolding needs to have structural stability.
What if it doesn't? What if it's a shaky structure? Then how does it? What happens then to the whole process?
So I'm saying if the scaffolding is bigger than the structure, if the scaffolding matters, and if the and what is being studied actually the present in this case.
But are we seeing scaffolding as something? I was actually seeing it something as temporary and in a site kind of atmosphere than actually a complete wholeness, like the structure actually.
Can a drone be a scaffolding?
What?
Can a drone be a scaffolding?
Yes, it's a scaffolding for data, no?
Right. So it has its own stability, even though it's not fixed.
Yeah, certainly. Before we move to the next question, people who would like to add something, Rohini, Shona, you've been silent most of the part of the this question.
Should I go first?
Yes.
Okay, so just to move this away from the architectonic sort of base of it, but because I think your question was also geared towards a temporal experience of the contemporary, I really like the terms in the process of, and I think Rohini invoked that there is a by the way-ness to it, you know. And I really like that sense because one of my favorite descriptive lines about the contemporary movement, and I mean this very specifically about the digital internet-heavy contemporary movement that we inhabit, is she uses this term, the enduring ephemeral. And
That's Wendy Choon's.
It's a deliberately sort of oxymoronic term, which I really like, because this sense of there being constant transience, constant ephemerality, like there's a constant sort of fleetingness, and that in itself being a durational, enduring experience is, I think, a close approximation of the kind of time experience that we have. For me, I mean, I'm absolutely fascinated by the figure of the GIF, you know, the GIF on the so much of like the GIF that we see inundated across social media and so on has to actually do with transient moments looped ad infinitum, right? So a sneeze, a fall, a cough, a really awkward, undignified sort of a fall into a puddle. You know, those are the raw material from which so much of GIFs are this thing, but yet they go on looping ad hominem, ad infinitum. And that sort of a vector for thinking about our contemporary moment, our contemporary experience of temporality, I think, is very productive. The sense of constant fleetingness, constant transience is central to both our use of the internet, of the way we inhabit the digital world. And so, I mean, just to move away from an architectural base to an interface base, I think could be.
It's a different approach to the, in terms of course, the digital infrastructure, which doesn't have the same structural kind of logic, but has a different, completely different. Even if you think in terms of architectural, it has a completely different architectonic approach to how it creates experience.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Also because the architectural now increasingly with leaps and bounds takes into account the interface, right? And I think there is a certain quality of temporal experience that we have on interfaces. And the word scaffolding also can be thought of in this world of interfaces that
Interface. Yes. Rohini, before we move on to the next one.
Well, maybe we can. I mean, I don't want to bring it in now, but I did like that we talked about fiction a little bit. That might be fun to discuss a little more, but I don't know if that's next on the agenda. But I don't have anything bad. I liked what Shonak said very much. That was,
Okay.
yeah.
So the next question for our thing today is contemporary cultural field, and it's very important for all of us in this discussion, a school where deviations are both celebrated and monitored. Are we working in a condition? Are we conditioned, schooled to being too deviant or too, and whether these deviances will be monitored? Whether that becomes a condition in which contemporary is spoken about.
Krishna Bolu, can you expand on the question a little?
Yeah, please do that. Mupi, can you repeat that?
I mean to say that there is a, I'm not saying it's directly related, but there is always this question of contemporary as being out of joint with time, right? It's a deviation from the time for the present, for example, the present that you inhabit. It's a condition that thinks out of the time than what actually it inhabits. So in that way, whether we being in a contemporary cultural field is actually in that way, whether a school or a structure within which constantly this idea of the deviations are produced and monitored, whether the deviation becomes the benchmark within which the contemporaneity of something is addressed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I think it depends a lot on who's asking the question. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's sort of crucial to this.
Can you expand?
In the sense that are we asking it as participants, in the sense practitioners within, or are we talking about the people who get to say who is a deviant, and you know what I mean? Like, this is a deviant.
No, I'm asking as people who are participating in it, because we are coming from extremely different trajectories, but at the same time in different backhand, two-hand, front-hand based participants of it's discursive, artistic, different kind of practices that we embody as practitioners. So in that way, being participants of it, what would be our take on thing like that? Whether that the idea of the deviation and the idea of deviation and its relationship with what contemporary means, or what is framed as a contemporary, what would be that? What kind of approach would take to this concern?
See, if deviation is considered as novelty or innovation, for example, novelty and innovation are slightly different, but in an evolutionary sense, it does help to have, I think it is celebrated in that sense, because here's something new, here's a new direction of thought, and it might be interesting to go in that direction. So it's a deviation of sorts from the path. So now whether that's fetishized is another question. Like, I mean, are we only looking for novelty, and so there's different types of deviations, and I do think
but deviation
it
is also seen literally as deviation, right? As something which is taboo, or something which is contrary to what is considered
the convention. But in a contemporary cultural field, right? Like, what is a contemporary cultural field? Is it the margins? Is that
the main bubble, the bubble of the mainstream?
But why only mainstream, right? Like, if we talk about contemporary art, it could encompass the edges
Also.
Yeah, also, exactly. So where are we on that spectrum?
So my question is, the moment you school something, then you're in some ways institutionalizing it. And so if you school deviation, it isn't a deviation anymore.
That's what I was trying to actually arrive at. Is it like where deviation becomes a system or a structure?
Yeah, so what are you deviating from when you're not, I mean, you stop deviating the moment it's schooled.
So as I was saying earlier, you're fetishizing. Yeah, go ahead.
Mandeep saying something.
Yeah.
So, from the perspective of dance, it's this holds very true in the way that ruptures and discontinuities become sort of the evidence you want to look at when you're looking at contemporary work, and they become celebrated in some sense. These deviations from forms and the way one thinks about constructing performances become things that you look out for, or almost sort of propagate. But in a way, the minute you think of it as a school, I'm not, and I don't mean a dance school here at all, but if you're actually looking at it quite consciously as a collective, what this also does is that the deviations sort of begin to pull you in the same direction, in similar directions. So in a way, it becomes very much the opposite of deviation, where it is a collective deviation. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
Deviation is becoming a norm. What I'm trying to arrive at, which is also adding on to what Mandi is saying, yes, in various fields that one broadly can call contemporary culture, where we come from multiple practices, perspectives, etc. So, what I'm trying to say is that when I say school, whether the deviation has become a systemized form of approach, whether that's the condition.
Yeah, I would say
Even
that
if it is,
deviation.
even if it is systematized, can you predict what the deviation is? Maybe you can't. Like, you don't know what the direction is going to be. Yes, we know that there is going to be a deviation, but we don't know what that deviation is. So how there is still value in it, even if it might be institutionalized.
No, but the system at this point might even have a bias towards the deviation. At this point,
but
the system
what?
is interested in the out of mode deviation.
No, so this is how I see it, that the moment a deviation is made, it ends up getting schooled. So the institution swallows up every deviation. It really consumes every deviation.
So the
and
deviation
then
happened first.
The minute you've got enough to qualify even as being a critical mass where you can school it, it's no longer a deviation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, but see, all kinds of events are going to form patterns on the graph. So now every pattern on the graph is that what you're calling a school?
No. The what is the average, the mean will be the school. So when the mean is very elastic and is absorbing every little peak on the graph, then the graph is just expanding.
But then it's no longer deviant. So then it'll have to shift.
Yes.
No, the mean cannot be the school, no?
The school is the one who decides what is the mean and what needs to be.
Do you think the school is one what co-opts? What's the deviation is?
School is the one who commodifies.
Co-op.
Right.
Yeah. But then that's
But why do we have to imagine an agent like the school?
Well,
so, because data is data. Data is data.
But,
if there is information in front of you, it's up to you with what you choose to do with it.
But there are those who use the data in specific ways to create certain thought jails.
Yeah, but why do they have to be thought about?
Because I think that's the condition that a lot of people are dealing with, right? And
at the moment, in terms of almost on an everyday context.
Yeah.
No, but I'm not saying that because we are not experiencing that agent, we don't have to deal with it. I'm saying that if we are talking about the data, if you're talking about instances or events which are cultural practices, and this is the field, if we are talking about the field actually, then we have a set of data. So if can we just look at the data? And I'm saying that
But the
if we
problem
spike
is
in
the
the
data is in the field. The data is in the field. Unfortunately, there is a socialization and normalization of which data is
But
considered.
Priya, just to build upon what you said, so there is always a data making, data construction of the data and the leak of the data. No? And whether the leak of the data is the deviation that one could talk about. What is the because there is, sorry, what was Shronak saying? Did someone say something in between?
No, just keep going.
Okay. So the whether then if you're saying that the data is being built and someone said that the data is also being built in a specific kind of structure, there are also deviations like the leaks where the data built for a specific purpose is actually reoriented into a completely different context. But the point what I'm trying to arrive at is that whether that is the condition that is slowly becoming the and I would not say institutional because it is a very heavy loaded world. That's why I used school. Maybe it's better to go back to school and think whether what are the implications of this shift.
See, I think it is more worrying if the deviations are constructed in a very conscious way. Like if a deviation is considered to be the desirable, and people are consciously trying to construct a deviation, that's a problem. It's not spontaneous anymore. It's like somebody decided, I have to go in. It's like product placement. I mean, I have to go in that
deviation
direction.
is activity on the field, and activity on the field is not always a manipulation. There is a genuine activity on the field, which is
No, it is there. But I'm saying what is worrying to me is manipulations of that nature.
हाँ, but manipulation की बात, I mean, manipulation is coming after the fact. In the if you look at the fact itself.
See, it could be, but if somebody says this is what deviation is, and this is, I consider this, suppose a person in influence says this is what a deviation is, and that's where the thought is going to go. They become this oracle. That's a problem.
Before that, if we just look at the events, if we just look at the field, if we just look at the mode of
right. Things are happening, deviations are happening.
Just look at those things.
We should, and that's what we should be looking at. But what I'm saying is, in contemporary situations, there is also this problem of people who take the position of the soothsayer or the oracle and say, this is where things are supposed to move, and this is the next new thing, and who are you to say that?
So I also wanted to add at this point this idea what happens when deviations are the
You're breaking
gets fear of becomes central to.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that before. Mandeep, can you say that again?
Okay. No, I was just talking about how when deviations become the one central thing in the way that you think about making and producing work. I'm talking specifically from the field of dance. Then what gets celebrated is the ideas of individuality, much more than ideas of community. And I think that this is a conversation that comes from a conversation that I was having with somebody, a practitioner who sits in the West, and was talking about how contemporary dance in particular has become so much about what an individual has to propose as a deviation, really, that a lot of practitioners now feel a sense of feel the need to connect to a community where individuality doesn't matter anymore. And I think I just wanted to sort of put that in where deviations also begin to help us, make us look at ourselves first in a way.
So you're saying that the deviations are actually directing towards something else. That's what you're saying.
I think he's saying that it's more individual.
Yeah, the individualistic. It becomes about what can I propose which is different from everyone else.
Yeah.
It becomes about what different.
So, Mandeep, I'd ask you a question there. So, if it is individualistic, do you think that the larger collective is giving enough room for that individualistic expression to survive as individualistic, or is it going to dissipate into becoming more collective? You know, like if is that individual expression going to be kind of taken over or adapted by the collective, or is this included as a collective? Because that's essentially, I think, what the question is asking, whether the field is just a school as being a territory where the deviations are mapped and celebrated.
Can I just add to that one thing? Also, then that brings into the idea also of duration. I mean, you're not going to be a deviant forever if you're going to continue to do the same thing, right? So at what point
That's also true. Yeah.
And then and if you keep shifting streams, then maybe you will be a deviant for a longer period of time, and then maybe you will not be part of the. It won't be so easy for you to be subsumed within this collective school, whatever. But yeah, in the text that would be.
I just wanted to say, actually, I like the idea of the space between the individual and the collective. I'm not proposing one or the other, but I'm saying how do these two things rub against each other? And I think what deviations propose is a very keen eye on individual, on the individual, rather than the collective. And I mean, it's certainly a thought that's forming as I speak. But,
okay.
That's just what I feel like. Where you see deviations are celebrated, and that's the only thing that gets celebrated, it can become problematic.
We have the last few minutes. People who have not would have like to add. People who have been silent.
Yeah, I think in terms of the deviations, I see it a lot where I work. My day job is teaching both high school and at Stanford, and it's most of my time, frankly, is kind of telling everyone stop trying to make yourself different for the sake of being different. But where's the work? Where's the work really coming from? And it's incredibly frustrating because it's not even about adding to the field or even adding to your own growth. It's and I don't want to say it's a generational thing, but definitely it's something where I have to point out like. What are you actually trying to move towards? And again, it's this getting back to my first statement about the very first question about like the sense of a ruler and do you follow the ruler or not? And I think the ruler for a generation trying to put their individuality forward to say that whatever I'm putting out is moderately or somewhat important, that I will deliberately go out of my way. And I'm very afraid of seeing that because they may be moving away from something that's actually more honestly their work and who they're becoming. And I see that in terms of a lot of cultural difference, of racial difference in the United States, and especially a lot of the political things I'm sure many of you are seeing on your news feeds. And many of us are trying to anchor a certain identity given the chaoticness of what's a young generation they're doing. So you see it in a cultural field where there are a lot of activists, artists, and cultural producers, to where deviating is just an act of trying to stay afloat. But it's I think it's really on teachers and educators and many of us in this group to kind of re-anchor our various communities towards that. It's that in-between space where it's also a irreducibility. Like you can't simplify like, oh, you're gonna make it just by moving away from something and then it gets cool and then your work is published and all that. Like it's never that simple.
Absolutely. Okay, sorry.
Just
Go ahead.
Rohini, you were saying something?
No, I was just saying I agree. That's absolutely just agreeing with what he said.
Shona, would you like to add? Tess, would you like to add?
Yeah. So sorry, Tess, do you want to go first?
No, you go for it.
Okay, so very quickly, I liked very much what Jerome said last, but I think like two specific things were quite interesting to me in this. One is memes and how we think about deviation, exceptions, and copying. So within largely the theory of hermeneutics, and trolling about how exceptions within a perceived whole then get attacked. So to a large extent, the way we think of memes has to do with even within universal Darwinism, there were three main categories. One was that if you have any sort of variation in any skill set, it could be in any sort of a sample set, it could be genes, it could be any sort of information, it could be computer analytics, it could be anything. If you have variation and then you have selection, you have heredity. So evolution, right from like a sort of Darwinian standpoint, also is design out of chaos without the aid of mind. You know, so even within so any kind of information that gets copied and over time pattern recognition happens, patterns emerge. It's within, so when we think of the exception or the anomaly, it's usually any kind of aberrations within the perceived pattern of it, which is why a lot of recent theory or writing around trolling is of a lot of interest to me. So it's, I mean this in the sense that, of course, today, and this is a bit of a digression, sorry, uh, today we inhabit a virtual space more than any other generation obviously ever has. So we inhabit time, or we inhabit time with our extended virtual technology more than any other generation ever has. And the one of the costs of this is that we're clearly moving towards a time when the very idea of a meat space body, I use the term meat space instead of real world because I don't like that term, but the very idea of one unitary meat space body will become a primitive one, will become an anachronistic one. And one of the ethical costs of this sort of a major shift ontologically and so on is anonymity. So much of trolling, for example, happens around happens in situations where people don't where people aren't revealing who they are. Anonymity is the base of it, and there's also a perceived pattern set around the people that they're trolling. And so much of violence and so much of, I mean, the kind of things that Jerome was invoking here has to do with a relationship between the whole and the part, and like whether the sum of the parts add up. And in that sense, I think it's a profoundly political question more than anything else. But
We should definitely, sorry to interrupt because we are out of time. So we will continue. We are going to rant a lot tomorrow together. So we will continue trolling and ranting tomorrow with each other. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow.
Thanks.
uh,
That's good.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.